Claude Code found over 500 real vulnerabilities in production codebases that SaaS tools had missed for decades. That's the kind of number that makes you rethink what your current security tooling is actually catching. Anthropic has made some pretty big claims about Claude Code, and right now developers are making real adoption decisions based on those claims. So I went through 15 sources, checked every number against independent tests, and I'm comparing Claude Code's 5 boldest promises to see which ones actually hold up. The claim I was most skeptical about going in is the one that could cost you real iteration time and real money if you believe it without checking. And I'm not going to tell you which one it is until we get to the conditional verdict. My name is Brian, and I'm in these tools 12 hours a day, so you don't have to be, and I went through every number and claim Anthropic and the community have put out about Claude Code across 5 big promises to tell you which ones hold up and which ones need a closer look. You've probably heard both sides on Claude Code. Some people say it's the best coding agent out there. Others say it's overhyped, and if you're working across multi-file codebases, legacy systems, or anything with real security exposure, getting this wrong means wasted hours, missed bugs, and a tool subscription that doesn't pay for itself. Claim 1. Claude Code can handle massive codebases, like multi-million line monorepos, and the cost of this being hype is real because a solo dev drops Claude Code into a repo with tens of thousands of files. It starts hallucinating paths and missing context, and now you've lost a day chasing AI-generated nonsense through a codebase you barely know. What I found here was pretty solid. Claude Code is actively running on multi-million line monorepos in production at organizations with thousands of developers. And that's not a demo. That's at scale. The honest caveat is the context window degrades when it fills up. Anthropic actually warns about this themselves, so you'll want to keep sessions focused. This claim delivers. I went in expecting some asterisk demo environment, but it's genuinely in production at scale. The context degradation is a real limitation and not a deal breaker, and no competitor publishes comparable numbers here. 1 of 1 claims holding up so far. Claim 2, Claude Code writes production-ready code on the first attempt, and the number that matters here is 80.8%, which is Claude's SWE bench verified score on Opus 4.6, and that sounds great until you ask what it actually costs you if that number is misleading and you ship the first output without a review pass. What surprised me here is how close the benchmark scores actually are. Opus 4.6 hits 80.8% on SWE bench verified, and GPT 5.3 Codex lands at around 80%, so that's essentially a tie within margin. And on SWE Bench Pro, I want to be careful because those are different model versions, so I couldn't call it a clean comparison. Now before I call a verdict, the nuance here really matters. A lot of people are hearing this as Claude always ships production code on the first try, but what the data actually shows is it does so more often than competitors, and independent blog tests say initial output usually needs iteration, which is a pretty different promise. This one is partially true. The benchmark scores are genuinely competitive, but the first attempt production-ready claim is overstated in practice. So we're at 1 of 2 claims fully holding up with 1 partially true. And yeah, the hard truth is you'll still need to iterate. Claim 3. Claude Code is best in class at debugging and explaining legacy code, and a senior dev gets handed a 10-year-old codebase with no docs, a broken build, and a stack trace that points nowhere useful. So if Claude just suggests the obvious fix and misses the actual root cause, that's hours of your time gone. This is where Claude Code stood out the most across every independent review I looked at. Users consistently report it traces non-obvious root causes rather than just pattern matching the surface error, and it explains code at the right level of detail, not over-explaining obvious things, which is something GPT-4 apparently struggles with more often. This claim delivers, and it's the most consistently praised dimension across all the independent tests I checked. So we're at 2 of 3 claims fully holding up now with 1 partially true, and debugging is where Claude Code earns its cost if you're sitting on a messy legacy codebase. 2 tests left, and the next one is the security claim, which is where the 500 plus vulnerabilities number from the open actually gets explained, and you want to know what it doesn't catch before you trust it with your production codebase. Claim 4. Claude Code catches security vulnerabilities that other tools miss, and your other tool has been running for years on your production codebase and flagged nothing critical. So if Claude Code is actually finding real bugs that slipped through, that's a legitimate ROI argument. But if it's just refinding known patterns, it's not worth the switch. What I found here is pretty striking. Anthropic's team used Claude Code to find over 500 vulnerabilities in production open source codebases that SaaS tools had missed for decades. And that's real-world evidence, not a synthetic benchmark. The caveat I want to be clear about is that Claude Code security only covers source code analysis, so supply chain and dependency threats are outside its scope. This claim delivers. I was expecting a marketing number with no real backing, but 500 plus verified vulnerabilities in live production code is hard to argue with. The supply chain gap is real, so don't treat it as a full security replacement. And that brings us to 3 of 4 claims holding up now with 1 partially true. Claim 5, Claude Code integrates with your workflow without any setup. Terminal native, Git commands via natural language, no plugins required, and you've probably heard this kind of claim before, and then spent 2 hours configuring extensions that half work. Because if it doesn't drop into your existing setup cleanly, the productivity gain disappears before you even start. What I found is that this one pretty much does what it says. Claude Code runs natively in the terminal, has extensions for VS Code and JetBrains, works in the desktop app and on the web, and handles full Git operations through natural language. So add, commit, push, branch, merge, all of it, with no external plugins or special setup required. This claim delivers. I was half expecting some asterisk about needing a specific setup, but it's genuinely frictionless across multiple surfaces. And that brings us to 4 of 5 claims, fully holding up with 1 partially true. The integration story is clean, and that matters for your actual day-to-day cost of using this tool. Alright, so where does Claude Code genuinely shine? Multi-million line monorepos in production, not a demo. Debugging, where it traces non-obvious root causes that other tools miss. Security, where it found 500 plus real vulnerabilities in live codebases. And integration, terminal native, Git via natural language, no plugin setup required. Now where does Claude Code fall short? The first attempt production-ready claim is overstated. You'll need to iterate. Context degrades in long sessions, and Anthropic warns about this themselves. Security only covers source code, not supply chain threats. And on SWE Bench Pro, GPT 5.4 scores 57.7% versus Claude's 45.89%. Though those are different model versions, so I take that comparison carefully. So here's the decision rule. 4 of 5 claims hold up, and the 500 plus vulnerability number is real. So it's worth it if you're working on complex multi-file codebases, legacy systems, or anything with serious security exposure. But skip it if you need a tool that ships production code on the first try without a review pass, because it's not there yet and you will still iterate. I ran Claude Code head-to-head against GitHub Copilot next, and the cost story flips pretty fast when you look at token pricing for long sessions. So if unit economics matter to your team, that one's already on the channel.